Hello, makeup artist in training. It's great to have you here. My name is Laura. If you're just joining, make sure you go back to the beginning of the course because this is a full course on how to become a makeup artist. This is the basics version. We will be doing an advanced version later. But for those of you that are just wanting to learn makeup artistry, this course is free. If you want to get certified, all of the details of that are below. There's a way to do that. There is a fee for the certification and for training, and there's a lot of advanced or bonus videos and things like that that go along with the course. But for now, let's just get started because this is your first makeup. I mean, we're on week 4. We had to get through all of these basic things before we could even start into makeup. So let's roll with it. But in the meantime, I'm going to talk you through some of these procedures so that you have an idea what I'm doing, just me talking to you in the camera without having all of the distractions of me applying the makeup and trying to explain it to class and things like that. So I will incorporate that into this video. Stay tuned. But for now, let's just talk a little bit. I'm going to explain a few things. And this is the application procedures. And basically what you need to start with, obviously, is make sure that you have cleansed and moisturized your client and that their skin is prepped. If you like to use a primer, you can go ahead and do so. Some people use different types of primers. Some people even use hydrating masks to prime with. Whatever is going to work with you, you might want to do a little bit of exploratory stuff with that. But as long as the skin is clean and hydrated, you should be able to get a fantastic makeup out of it. So we are going to be going into, of course, color corrector, foundation, concealer, powder, highlight, and contour. But basically what I want to do now is just sort of teach you how to choose the right color, because that can be a huge issue, and just walk you through positioning and seating and all the good stuff, how to touch your client. Those are all really, 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 really important. So let's start. So we've already talked about the beauty blenders, sponges, and things like that in past video. So basically we're going to start off. You want to make sure that you have your sponge. This one here is not damp enough, so I'm going to show you the difference in size. So this is the size ahead of time. Alright, so we're going to start with our beauty blender. This is just the classic shape, just to keep it easy. So I brought the paper towel out just because I've been explaining about grabbing the sponge and wrapping it in the paper towel and squeezing out the excess water. You can see it squeezed out on there. And you want it so that it's a damp feel, but so that it's not wet. So you want to hold your sponge usually in a way that is comfortable. Like holding it this way is okay if you're going to be dolloping on the face this way, but you want to make sure that you have your position on your sponge correct. If you're using the triangular sponges, the triangle, the thick end, the triangle, you want to hold it that way, because what's going to happen with holding it that way is you're going to be able to angle the angles into the face, because the triangles have like a more shape to, or more flat side to it. So with this being the pointed side, you'll want to put that up towards the eye, because that's where your detail work's going to go, or in towards the nose or corners of the mouth, things like that. So that's your holding position, okay? Remember, having your sponge slightly damp is going to take away a lot of the chalkiness of your makeup. So it is a really crucial step. If you don't do that, you'll notice a massive difference on how your foundation actually turns out. So keep that in mind when you're choosing sponge. If you prefer applying your makeup with a brush, you can do so, yes, but just keep in mind there's many different shapes and sizes to foundation brushes, so you'll have to experiment a little bit to see what you enjoy working with the most. You will sometimes get a varied effect with a brush, so if you want to, and you've got a look that you're doing and you want to kind of experiment a bit with using a brush to see if you like how that looks better, you could sometimes get a thicker application with the brush, because the brush really isn't taking too much off the way the sponge can pull up the excess. So depending on the look you're after, okay, that is one thing to keep in mind for what you're going to do for makeup as far as application, or do a combination of both. Use both brushes and sponges to get your desired effect. So many of you might have different philosophies on how to do foundation, but for me, I do like to use my hands. I always have, because the warmth of my hands really helps. But I always disinfect my hands first. I work a lot with my hands. But if you do prefer and you want to do a more sanitary approach, you can go ahead and use more of like a plated palette or something to that effect. But for argument's sake, I'll show you how I work it on my hand just so you can see it. So basically what I do is I normally take a couple of squirts of foundation in terms of starting, and then I will obviously input in here demonstration of it all. But when you're going to be applying it, you want to apply it out in sections, so sections of the face, and then you want to blot and blend. What you don't want to do is apply the foundation all over the face and then start blending. The reason being is it will dry up on you before you get a chance to blend it a lot of the time, and then your application work will be sort of destroyed. So my suggestion is to put the closest color to their skin type on your hand or on a palette, and then test it right here on the jawline area. And if it seems to sit well, then you're going to go ahead and apply it. But I like to put a dimensional approach. I like to put a darker, a dead on, and a slightly lighter. So I, in essence, can do a little bit of contour highlight with the foundation itself as I'm working, but that's personal preference. That's something that I like to do. Or if you're into it, you can go ahead and do some color correcting before and contour work before you've even begun the foundation. But if you're not going to do that and you want to do it afterwards, then you're going to apply it in the way that I'm explaining. And then what you're going to do is you're going to bounce the sponge lightly on the surface once you've spread it as much as you can with your hand. And that will collect the excess and also blend it together. What you don't want to do is swipe it off. So if you swipe it off, you've just wasted that foundation. You want to make sure that the pressure's right and it's not going to swipe right off. So we're going to be doing a full makeup in this chapter. So basically what you want to do is get your foundation straight. Obviously we're going to talk about correctors. We're going to talk about concealers, powders, highlight, and contour. Paying attention to the light and the shadow on the face, trying to enhance where the light hits the face and gently shadow in other areas. So if you would like to, and if you feel like you're more advanced, you could put 2 tones or 3 tones, one a little deeper right on, and then one a little bit lighter. So you can begin a very subtle highlight, contour, or shadow and light effect even with your foundation, because it does do really great subtle things, and you can maneuver even just with your foundation alone. So you're going to take out your foundation, you're going to squirt it out onto your hand. If you want to squirt it out onto a palette, like a metal palette like this, you can, but I like to work with my hands. It's kind of fun. So you can put it onto your hand, and then what you're going to do is take up a little bit and dabble it on to a 1/6 of the face, and you want to continue on to the different areas of the face. What I do suggest you not doing is putting the foundation, dabble it everywhere, and then blend, because you're going to use your sponge after you put on a little bit onto the skin. You're going to use your sponge. Oops, I got it in my hair and on my cheek. That's okay. We'll just wipe that up. So you're just going to use your sponge to dabble off the excess. If you prefer using a brush, you can go ahead and dab in your brush and put it everywhere. And then you're going to use your sponge to go back and blend, because you're going to need to always blend with a sponge at the end. And those who don't, you can see streaks and things like that, and it's not very pretty. So we're going to continue on with all of the procedure for application. So stay tuned for that as we continue. One final thing I want to say, with choosing your color, if you have multiple colors, you can maneuver between things like your jaw area, your neck, cheeks, forehead, because you can vary the color so that it coordinates, and you can also draw it down the neck. So just keep that in mind. That's why it's good to have more than one color, because we are often very different colored between our face and our neck, especially if we are using sunscreen and we maybe put it just on our face and not on our neck, or our face is always covered, our neck is covered and we forget to do our face, or our face isn't covered enough, and it can change colors. Most of the time the face is darker than the neck because of the way that the light hits the face, but if we sunscreen, it's going to reverse that. So you have to blend the two together depending on what you've done with sun and skin color changes within our neck, and our cheeks and our jaw and our ears can really do a number on us. So we've got to make sure all those 3 things are coordinated in, and even keeping attention a little bit to the chest as well, to make sure that everything's pulled together and toned right. and sometimes you have to alter the tone of your foundation. If you're peachier here but you're gold here, you might want to bring a little gold up into the face. Those kinds of things in order to tweak. You have. If you've got a golden undertone, you want a golden undertone foundation. If you've got more of a peach undertone, that's the type of colors that you would like to use. You want to make sure that your tones are going to match. The best place to check it, and some of you may or may not know, is going to be on the jaw area. The neck is always going to be a different color than the face, so ignore that. You can always blend that together later with bronzer. When you put on the foundation, it should overall disappear into the skin, and you really want to just bang on with the color. You don't want to have anything too dark and you don't want anything too light. So what we're going to do right now is show you some technique on how to apply this foundation. I'm going to put little bits in sections on the face, and I'm going to put it a little heavier than usual only so that you can see how I'm applying it. When you're doing this to yourself, it just depends on how much coverage you're looking for. So I'm spreading it a little bit with my fingers because my fingers are not soaking up anything, but when you use a sponge, it does soak up the product. You don't want to use your product all up into your sponge and waste it. Just use your sponge to blend the excess. Just going to turn slightly. And use your sponge to blend the jawline to make sure that there's no demarcation line in there. And keep working up the face. Look up for me, Sophia. As you can see, the foundation does give some coverage, but not enough to make Sophia happy as far as coverage under her eyes. So that's when we're going to get into the concealer after this. The foundation gives you some coverage under the eyes. And you want to make sure that it's blended into the hairline and back. Close your eyes. And you want to make sure that you've got foundation on the lid, entire lid. This is a really great secret for making your eyeshadow stay on longer and makes it much more even if you've got a nice coverage all over the eyelid. And I'm just going to use my sponge to move it around and buff off the excess. She had a bit of a complaint about some blemish areas on her forehead. I'm going to show you how to cover that. Just light moving around and then using your sponge to just soak up the excess and buff it. And as you can see, we've already worked on the other side of her face. And so once we're done, you'll see the total coverage of everything. So that's all you need to do with the foundation. Very simple, very easy, takes a couple of minutes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a spatula, or you can use your finger, and I'm scraping up a little bit of color. If your concealer does not perfectly match your foundation, but it's close, you can always mix a little bit of the two together. In this particular case, it's so close that you won't be able to see the difference. Look up for me. Take your fourth finger, because it is your gentlest finger, and very gently create a tiny mask around the eye. And if you smear, if you pull, it will take it off. So you have to gently press it on and keep applying it in light layers, like so. And make sure that you get it inside. If there's any creases, you get it inside the crease so that when her eyes are powdered, there's not going to be anything left as far as product resting in the crease. Close your eyes. You want to make sure you do full coverage on top of the eyelid. Again, amazing base for your foundation later, and for your eyeshadow later. And I'm covering the entire lash line and right up into the lash line area where your eyeliner goes. Take your sponge and you could just dabble it along to make sure everything is even. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my finger and go over any other areas that I think might need a little extra coverage, like in her forehead area where she was complaining about some red marks. I'm just buffing it to blend it in.
Around the nose area is an area that does get some redness, so that's a good area to cover. And also you can go right up to the lip line. It's great sealant for your lipstick later or your lip gloss later, and great coverage. So I've done one layer of foundation, one layer of conceal. I'm going to go back and get ready with my powder in my hand. Here's my powder. And around the eye area first especially, look up for me, I'm going to do one final conceal. So I'm actually double layering because she is really concerned about making sure that she's got full coverage under the eyes. Making sure it's nice and even looking. I'm going to hold that position, take my sponge, put it into my powder, buff the excess, and gently go in and seal it so that it won't crease anymore. And you'll have that perfect coverage under the eye and no dark circles. We're going to go ahead and get her to close her eyes. Same thing with on the lid. Your eyes are very hot. They're going to be the first thing to crease because heat emulsifies and creates a little bit of a line in there, so you want to make sure that's all moved out, because if you powder before you move that crease, it cements the crease in. So now I'm going to seal everything so that it's nicely sealed and won't move. Her eyeshadow will go on so nicely later. Then I'll worry about the rest of the face, make sure that there's no issues or no things I'm missing. If you have a pimple that you're trying to cover, you can always take a fine brush as well and detail it a bit with a brush. But right now, Sophia's pretty clear with pimples. So I'm going over and sealing everything really, really well. Without the powder step, your foundation and your concealer will not last at all. So you want to make sure that you've got a powder with the concealer and the foundation, or all your work will be lost. Okay, so far we've evened everything out. Your next step after this is going to be to bronze and blush and eyebrows a little more sealed, and that way you don't look as pale. If you're working on yourself, it might freak you out to see yourself looking a little bit white like a ghost, but as soon as you put bronzer on, everything will come together and you'll look even and flawless.
So when you're trying to figure out what actually is the right color, you want to basically take a little bit of product, and you could, when you're testing, you could test it here on the jawline area, and it could look light going on, but then when you blend it in, it actually is the right color, just depending on your skin coloring. So it's a really good idea to just to test it and then blend it, because it can shock you how a color that doesn't look right at first, whether it looked too dark or too light, can be the right color. But it's a good idea to have, if you're testing, say you're in the store, test 2 or 3 different colors that are close and color match them right here on the jaw, because this is where it gets tricky, where it goes onto the neck and there can be color differences. So something that you could pull it all together with is really wise. And you also have to pay attention to what tone undertones you have. So if you're peachier, or if you're olive, or if you're neutral, or if you're golden, or if you're redder, any of the mocha, any of the tones, beautiful tones that are, you have to pay attention to those. You may need to downplay those a little bit or upplay other tones. So even though, say for example, you might be peach toned, you might want to have a bronzier look. So you can use all of these foundation colors, bronzers and all that to change your tone. But when you're choosing a foundation and you're not going to do a lot of bronzing, then you want to get it more bang on undertone wise. So take a look in the mirror and see what undertone you think you have, and that can definitely change season wise as we get more sun. But take a look and see, and let me know in the comments below what undertone you think you are. Let's get a consensus. One thing I want to tell you is, if you're doing makeup on someone else, then you'll want to make sure that your breath is clean or good. And I always have gum or mint with me, and you want to make sure you offer that to the person in front of you. If you're just doing it on yourself, obviously not, but if you're working on someone else, you want to make sure that you consider breath If you are a smoker, you want to make sure that you're washing all the way up to the elbows. I'm hoping that you're not smoking, but if you are, or any other breath issues, is a huge thing, because it's hard for a person to enjoy a makeup if your breath is bad, or if their breath is bad. They're going to be self-conscious the whole time. So just keep that in mind if you're working on someone else. So in doing makeup for so many years, I kind of did a number on my back. So keep mindful of your back if you happen to be working on someone. So basically what I suggest you doing is either have them up in a high chair that's plenty of highness for your back, or if you are just have regular chairs, you want to sit across from the person and straddle them, and hopefully you don't have too tight of a skirt on or anything like that, and then you just can lean forward and you have them lean forward into you. And I will demonstrate that in upcoming videos, but just to give you a heads up, your positioning needs to be there. If you're too far away from them, you won't be able to see the balance in their face. And if you're just doing makeup on yourself, make sure your lighting is good. You can always go outside in the natural light to check it if you're not sure if you're getting the right tone, because natural light is going to be your truest light. And it's a really good idea if you're a makeup artist, if you have any or a makeup artist in training and you've got any chance to get outside, to just take a quick peek, because it can surprise you. I don't know if you've ever looked at your makeup when you get in the car and you're like, oh, this is ridiculous, what has happened here? So you want to make sure, that always happens to me with hairs on my face, chin hairs and stuff. So just make sure that you are getting an accurate read on the colors that you are applying, and that your position is good, and that your back is good, and that you're hopefully in a cool place, cool, dry place. If you need to, bring a fan along, or have a fan near you, or a little portable air conditioner, because the summertime, putting makeup on, we know what that's like. Weddings, if you're trying to get people ready for a wedding, for example, and it's really hot, I always am conscious of the temperature, because that can make the makeup melt. And so wherever you are doing your makeup, make sure the temperature is okay and you're going to be able to get through it without sweating it all off.